Hey guys, welcome to The Creative Entrepreneur. Today we have a great guest for you. You're not going to want to miss this. We're going to learn about building a business from the ground up, and you don't want to miss this episode, so stay tuned.
Coming to you from San Antonio, Texas. Welcome to The Creative Entrepreneur, a podcast created to help entrepreneurs build their business. Branding, marketing, analytics, positioning, and lead generation, plus interviews with other business owners to learn from their successes and failures. Now, here is your host, Abel Garza.
Hey guys, welcome back to The Creative Entrepreneur. Today we have a great guest for you. We're going to be talking to Rick Martinez. He's a serial entrepreneur, nurse, and he's built businesses. And so I'm pleased to have Rick Martinez in the studio today. And we're going to be talking about business, and we're just going to kind of keep it conversational and let it go. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Abel. This is awesome. I love your freaking setup here. This is so cool.
I did this just for you.
This is so cool. Yeah.
So we got to know each other a little bit. We met over at the Bunker Labs in San Antonio.
Right.
And I just fell in love with your story. So why don't you start out by giving me a little bit of information about who you are, what you do, and how you help your customers?
Sure. So I'll give you like the 30,000 foot view, if you will, the peaks, and then just choose the valley you want to dive into. So very long story short is I've been a registered nurse for 25 years. So my journey started in healthcare, very traditional industry, very traditional job, if you will. And it was about the year 2000 that I recognized there was a gap. And I say this with all love and humility, but we wanted to use our skills as caregivers and serve more people. So we launched a company, staffing, and we serve the federal government. From there, again, I'm going to give you the high level.
Yeah.
After doing that starting from nothing, from a desk in my 1-bedroom apartment, 600 employees, about $1 million a week in gross revenues. So we grew it from zero to a sizable organization, sold that, exited about 5 years ago from this recording. But along that journey, as I really fell in love with mentoring, advising, and then because we had some means after our sale, angel investing. And so as a result, I mentored and advised startups, kind of the art of the start, which is I love being in the dirt of any startup, business 101. But we also launched several other businesses. Like we launched San Antonio, some of the first CrossFit gyms here, been back in 2007-8, launched a food delivery service. So several organizations, some were bad, very bad mistakes, really bad, learned some lessons. But long story short, where we come to the modern, to today, if you will, was several years ago, a good buddy of mine, a Marine, asked me for help with his startup. And, this is the segue into what I do now, which your listeners are going to find very sexy and intriguing because the world is finding this topic sexy and intriguing as we speak. He asked me for help with the startup. And I said, first question I asked him, and take note, is who do you want to help? And he said, I want to help veterans with PTS. And as a veteran, I just for the listener's sake is drop the D. Don't say PTSD because a lot of veterans don't view this as a disorder. It's post-traumatic stress. And I said, I'm in. Whatever you want to do. I'm a former Army nurse. So I said, whatever you're going to do, I said, I'm in. I'm going to help. And I said, how are you going to do that? And he said, CBD. And I had no idea what that was, Abel. No idea. I thought it was some military acronym or some military, I thought it was, combat battle deployment or something. And I was like, what the heck is he? And I said, okay. And I was on Facebook Messenger because he's out in California. And I said, what's CBD? And turns out it's part of the cannabis plant. So that was my introduction to where I live and play now in the cannabis industry, CBD. But as you can tell from what I just shared, the high level is it's been a journey. This has been about a 30-year journey as an entrepreneur, actually a little over 20 years as an entrepreneur. And we're going to dive a little bit more into what we do now in CBD and how it can be impactful. The lessons we're learning in a counterculture industry can be as impactful, if not more so, for the quote unquote traditional business. So there you go. That's the high level stuff.
Well, it seems like you have a cornucopia of areas of expertise that you've done a lot of things in what seems to be a short period of time because you're a nurse, you're doing media production, you have a podcast, you're doing CBD, you're investing, you're getting involved with startups. What would you say right now you're focused on? What is the area of expertise that you're focused on making larger?
That's a great question. And I love the question because coming into the new year, because we're in 2020 as we record this, is I realized I was doing too much. I was spread too thin. Diving into the hustle, the grind, which is something we should all be wary of. It's not sexy. And I had to say no to a lot of things. So I had to say no to some of the investment groups I belong to. So to answer your question very succinctly is in 2020, what we're really focused on as Green Seed Cannabis Co., which is now a media company, is producing some of the best podcast and media content or content for our podcast and YouTube channel to really educate and showcase what this industry can and should be about from somebody who has no business being in this industry, myself, like I shared with you. Mm-hmm. So first thing is our podcast, high quality content, showcasing, educating the industry and the average Joe, if you will, about what the cannabis industry is and can be from a consumer or entrepreneur standpoint. Second is my speaking. I speak at conventions, both cannabis and non-cannabis across the country about marketing, specifically harnessing counterculture marketing in a very normal culture world, if you will. In other words, how we are succeeding in a misunderstood industry. And I've been asked to speak at conferences that are very traditional marketing conferences. And the last thing is I still keep my feet very wet as a provider, as a registered nurse. It's just a skill that this is how I started. It's part of who I am, my roots. So as I was sharing with you just coming in today is at 4 a.m. I was as a circulating nurse in an OR today. So I'm still an active practitioner as well. Busy.
Wow. Well, so let's delve into the CBD. So you say you didn't know much about CBD, but you started it. So a lot of people feel like they need to know about their product or they need to know everything there is to know about a certain industry before they even get into it. What made you just say the heck with it? I don't know much about it, but you know what? I'm going to get into this because I feel like this is something that could be big. What made you move towards that or gravitate towards that?
Good questions. And I got to say, I think the first thing was my friend's why, his value proposition, the reason why he wanted to start this. There's no doubt that there's tremendous amount of opportunity out there, not just in cannabis or CBD, which is without a doubt a hot industry. But more important is as an individual, whether we're in the idea stage or the startup stage, or growth stage is to be in touch with the reason why, that deep set purpose. And it's not my idea, not what I came. Simon Sinek actually came up with this concept years and years ago. It's, start with why. And that's what really compelled me. And here's the reason why that's so important, because if my friend had called and said, I want to start a cannabis company, I would have said no. I was raised as an anti-cannabis. I was a military officer. I was very traditionally raised that this is the devil's lettuce and stay away. Ricky, it's going to do no good. You'll end up in jail. And look what happened to your cousins or whatever. So if they had started or he had started with, I want to launch a cannabis company, I would have said, I'm not your guy. But when you start with the reason, the passion, the driver, the thing that is going to that lights you up. When he said, I want to help veterans with PTS or PTSD, I'm like, I need to hear more. And even then, Abel, it still took me easily close to a year before I even told anybody, because
it's a no-no.
Yeah, it's a no-no. And I was, what are people going to think of me? And, my wife and I have made through our former company connections with entrepreneurs all over the planet, literally. And I thought, what are they going to think of us now, diving into this industry that nobody wants to be in? And I had a personal issue with it. I realized that it was my problem. But first thing is understand the reason why and really latch onto that. Put your hooks into that thing. And once you're tied into that reason, it's difficult to stop you.
I get that. So, there's a lot of questions surrounding this topic because you get involved with the youth of America, and we find that a lot of kids are delving into this because it's just common. Like when we were kids, we did all kinds of stuff when we were kids. Now you can put them in pens, where they can just there's no scent and they can just do it wherever they want. But there's a lot of situations where I've had experience with young kids that it's bad for their health, and they end up in the hospital because they're smoking too much of it and they get sick. So how do you address those types of questions? When somebody comes and says, well, you're starting up in this industry, but you're not benefiting our youth. And how do you address those issues?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we need to make a distinction on is cannabis is really kind of a very broad word, but underneath that cannabis is, kind of falls, and these are the way I want to explain it to folks, is CBD and marijuana. So it's very new, even though marijuana has been around for decades, like literally black market for decades. So it's not new. It's just new to a lot of people because now it's legal in a lot of states. In fact, over 30 states now have some sort of marijuana program, medical or recreational. It's here and it's here to stay. So I want to make the distinction first about CBD or not versus marijuana, because they both have their benefits. And also the second big distinction I want to make is that there are bad players in every industry. Every industry has the good ones and they have the shitty ones. Mm-hmm. They are. And underneath all that, it's not, here's what we can do as a curious consumer or a curious parent or a curious entrepreneur or a father or mother, whatever it is do some diligence. Educate yourself first. It's important that we decide, I want to learn more before we point fingers. That was my problem. You see, I had been raised with one lens. This is bad. One lens only. It was the anti-cannabis lens. And when I realized, my friend said, I want to help veterans and CBD is a real potential, I suddenly realized there was another lens. And so the first thing I did was this, to make it even simpler, to give your listeners a place to start. And I kid you not, people roll their eyes at me or they look at me like, yeah, right, go to Barnes & Noble. I kid you not. Barnes & Noble several years ago maybe had one or two magazines about marijuana. High Times was one of them, very counterculture, very weed centric. And that's really the only one I can think of. Now you can go to Barnes & Noble. There's still not a lot of books, but there's easily a dozen magazines now. Some of them are very well done and you can learn a lot. And what I tell people is go and read them all cover to cover, not just about the new strains or how it's helping folks with anxiety, but read about who's advertising in them. Several years ago, you would never see law firms. Now they're littered with law firms. Several years ago, you would never see media companies. Now they're littered with media companies. Several years ago, you would never see social media gurus saying they're going to help you. Now it's littered with them because people are recognizing the sheer massive opportunity in every aspect. It's not just about the plant anymore, Abel. This is about true opportunity from a variety of angles. And that ties into what we're probably going to talk about, why we decided to launch a media company, because it was a community, an aspect of the industry that wasn't being served in a competent and ethical way. So first thing is empower yourself. And I kid you not, I tell people, go to Barnes & Noble. That's the first thing you should do for a few reasons. One, because it's free. You don't have to spend money. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have gas or a car, then go online. And if you don't have a computer, go to the library. And if you continue making excuses, you're in the wrong industry. Yeah. You don't belong. You probably should not be an entrepreneur. Barnes & Noble. Second thing, find a conference. Again, I'm going to go back to several years ago when we entered the industry. There was just a handful of CBD or cannabis conferences or expos. Now they are literally almost every week. And here in Texas, we held one of the first and largest last year in San Antonio. Now this year in 2020, there's probably 7. There's one coming up soon in Austin. There's one in Houston coming up. Mm-hmm. There's another one in Dallas, Fort Worth. They're everywhere. Go to a conference. You get to actually meet people, talk to professionals, talk to experts, talk to folks who are just like you. Do those things first.
And then so doing these things, doing these preliminary things first, is that going to get me into the industry if I want to start my own company? Or how would I go about in investing in something like that? I mean, do I need licenses? Is there a certain protocol that you need to follow? Or are there certain bottlenecks that you've run into with regard to starting this?
And the bottlenecks are bottlenecks galore. And this is great questions, because I think what I've with love and respect, a lot of people, when they think about this industry, they think about two things: growing it or selling it. In other words, a plant touching part of the industry. And while that's very, very sexy, we did an episode on our show, Weed to No Basis, probably the third or fourth episode we ever did, about the number one question I get asked. And the number one question I got asked was, how do I get started in this industry? Where do I go first? This is very sexy, growing it, selling. How do I get started? And I would always tell them, go to Barnes & Noble first, educate yourself. You're going to see it's very vast. And then when they ask questions about, specifically, it always revolves around growing or selling, being a retail operator or going to California and growing weed. Mm-hmm. And you can do that. It's not something I want to do. The second thing I ask them is this something you really want to do? Or do you have a green thumb? Do you want to go actually grow marijuana, or is it just the sexiness that's attracting you? But more so is to think about where you want to be in 1 year, 3 year, 5 years. Think about you first. Be very, very selfish about, in any industry, not just cannabis, any business. I can point to our foray into the CrossFit world, where we launched 2 gyms. If I had asked myself these questions prior, I may not have done this, because at the time it was very, very sexy. In fact, there's a correlate. History repeats itself in business and in life. Cannabis is very sexy. Ask yourself this question first, because now you've probably seen them. There are shops opening up everywhere. Here in San Antonio, there's easily 4 to 5 dozen, if not more. It's very easy to open up a store. And I'll answer your questions about regulatory issues and bottlenecks. One might find themselves suddenly in 6 months or a year realizing that I'm having to wake up and go open up the door and stand behind a register and sell retail. And all I really wanted to do was create something in the industry. And that's why I say be super selfish about what it is you want to do. Again, in any industry. If you have kids, that's going to affect what you want to do. Think about all the things that you can do in this industry. And I'll use cars as a correlate, because this helps people wrap their mind around the vastness. If somebody said, Rick, I want to get into the car industry, I would say, great. Do you want to make tires, or do you want to sell warranties? Do you want to be the guy who paints them or rebuilds wrecks? Do you want to buy a dealership, or do you want to invest in a Chevy, whatever? Mm-hmm. My point is that it's that vast. Cannabis is the same. Do you want to be a media? I
never would have thought that.
It's so massive. I spoke to a group in Indiana, and the same questions emerge. And I love the question, because I just want to give information back. And I said, how many of you in here are professionals? A lot of hands went up. And I said, how many of you want to get into the industry? Same hands went up. I said, how many of you think of the industry as generally growing or selling? Same hands went up. I said, do you know that there's a need for CPAs? Anybody in here is CPA? Some of those hands that went up, about 2 of them went up because they were CPAs. I said, do you know that there's the 280 tax laws and all these things that cannabis entrepreneurs need to know that you already know? What if you just took what you already knew and parlayed that into the industry, and you could see light bulbs going off? And I said, how many of you are attorneys? And 1 or 2 attorneys. I said, cannabis law is an emerging sector. I said, what if you became the cannabis attorney of your city and you see more light bulbs went off? I said, how many of you, whatever, you can continue asking the question, and people are like, so I don't have to just grow it or sell it. I'm like, no, you don't, which is why people like us exist, because what I'm good at, my gift is speaking. I told you earlier, I was a media, and I won't use the word on your, I gravitate towards media. And I realized that let me just do more of that and help the industry grow and expand in an ethical and responsible way. And that's what we do. So focus on your talents first. Bottlenecks are, oh my gosh. First and foremost is banking is an issue. Whether you like it or not, accept it or not, it is an issue. Advertising is an issue. You cannot run, and I'm talking now about plant touching parts of the business. You can't just run Facebook ads. You're going to get shut down. You'll get your account shut down. You get banned, and you can't fight Zuckerberg. I'm sorry, you just can't. The things that are available to a traditional entrepreneur, the things that we consider just basics, bank accounts, merchant processing, in other words, the ability to swipe a credit card, are tenuous or difficult at best. Plus, bottom line is, if you want to start a CBD business, like a plant touching product based I want to sell a tincture or a gummy, you better have a good 7 figures stockpiled up, because it's going to be a long, hard road. It can be done, but you better be ready for a long, potential arduous battle, because everybody's doing this now. Everybody.
Well, San Antonio is a little bit more liberal now. And so I start to see a lot of these CBD companies popping up. And in fact, there's one right down the street. And so with regard to these guys that are popping up here now, do they have THC in them, or is it just CBD, like non-THC oils that they're selling here in San Antonio? Because do you have a store here in San Antonio?
Nope, I do not. I learned a long time ago when we were partnered into opening up retail that retail was going to put me in a place that didn't fit into my lifestyle.
Oh, so, I see. Well, from your experience, do they have THC in these stores right now?
No, THC. So it's the distinction for the audience is THC is the illegal component or the regulated component of the plant. That's the part that gets you high. CBD, because of the farm bill that the president signed in 2018, is now 50 state legal. It always has been, but now it's signed into law. The farm bill, the hemp, all these different laws. I'm not an attorney, but in the state of Texas, THC is illegal, period. So if there's any shop that's selling a THC product, they are operating in the black market. They're an illegal store. So
unless you're California or Washington or Colorado, then you're
Illinois, Washington, D.C. Remember,
I just named off the few that I know. I'm sure there's plenty of them. Was there like 14?
There's 30 plus states now. Yes, that now you can now purchase a marijuana product, either medicinal with a prescription or just walk into a store and buy a joint.
Yeah.
The Vegas Strip now, you can go see a show, you can go gamble, you can get a drink, and you can go buy a joint.
I didn't know we could do that in Vegas. When I go through Colorado, and I was like, and I told the boys, I said, "Look, check out the size of those vines." I thought they were grapevines. I said, "Check out the size of." Hey, what's that over there?
Yeah. Yep.
My son already knew what it was. He's like, he's just nodding his head.
Yeah, Dad, you got to step out of the dark ages.
He's like, oh man.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's legal in those states, but I think we're getting closer to that here in San Antonio, especially with all the stuff that's going on here in San Antonio. But I think that's where it's leaning towards, and so now that you started this media company and you're wanting to help other businesses build their business through this media company, or are you just using this as a platform for your business?
Both. Honestly, Abel, as we're speaking right now, I don't know where the media company is going. I know a few things. One is that I enjoy, we produce 2 episodes a week, and I enjoy the taping. I enjoy the film, and I enjoy that we're able to educate the community. If I was to paint the vision or the picture, which is something every entrepreneur should do, you should have your vision cast for 1, 3, 5 years, if not longer. The BHAG, which is your big, hairy, audacious goal, 10, 20 years out, is, I liken this to, let's say, the CNN of weed, or the Gary Vaynerchuk, VaynerMedia of pot. I do. I learned a long time ago to dream big, because we'll just wind back. If you had told me when I started MedTrust, my wife and I were dating. She's in the other room on her computer right now. We're still in the grind, folks. Even after you exit and do these things, you're always an entrepreneur at heart. If somebody had said, Rick, you're going to get to the point where your company's doing $1 million a week in revenue, I would have said, you're full of shit. There's no way. Mm-hmm. I just want to spend more time with my daughters. I want to ride my mountain bike more. I want to hang out with my dog, and I want to spend time with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. That's all I want. That's all I wanted to do. And that's why getting in touch with your driver is so critically important, because I realized that was really, really important to me. And we just happened to accomplish that by building a business. The correlate is people think, let me build a business so I can have those things.
Exactly.
And it's wrong. It's backwards. Yeah. So that's why I say be selfish with your drivers, your desires. Be really, really selfish, because you don't want to wake up in a business you hate. Yeah. So
I just had a guy come on the show the other day. He's Mexican, a native Mexican, came over to the United States, and he told this story, which is great. And it's resonating with me now, because you're telling me about this, being able to spend time with your family. But the way he told the story was that he says, why don't you open up, well, a friend of him told his dad this. He says, why don't you open up a store and then another store and then another store? And then by the time you know it, you'll have a bunch of stores and you can go spend time with your friends and family by then. And he says, I'm on my way right now to go spend time with my friends and family. So, I mean, it's like you don't have to go that route. If you already have and Gary talks about this too. You know, he talks about whether you look into yourself and find out what it is that you really want to do in this life. You know, you could have all the money in the world, but if you don't have time, you know, to share it with anybody, or if you don't have time to spend, you know, with your friends and family, and you're just working all the time, then where's your life? You know, it's not there. And that's what he was trying to say within this story, is that, you know, you can open up another barbershop and then 2, 3, 4 barbershops, but he was already on his way to go spend time with his friends and family. And why am I going to open up all these stores when I'm already doing what I want to do?
Yeah.
You know? So with this media company that you're working on, and I can tell that you're loving it. And that, you know, and I get a lot of feedback, a lot of information from people who come onto the show. And I love it because I get to delve into areas of their brain that I don't typically get to go into, you know, like, and that's one of the reasons why I started this podcast. Yes, it was to help other people. Yes, it was to go out and help other entrepreneurs build their business. But the selfish part of me was the curiosity, wanting to know, how did Joe Schmo here start from nothing? How did he take this business and now build it into a multi-million-dollar company? And over the years, I've learned that you don't have to be the inventor. You don't have to be the one who started the idea. All you have to do is get in and grind and get out from behind Netflix, stop binge watching True Blood, and get out there, get in front of get on the phone and start working, you know. And a lot of people start like that without any money or any capital or even any revenue. But the thing is, how did they do it? How did they start? What is it that they started with? You know, how much money did they invest, and what type of education do they have? And all these little questions that come up with this podcast is feeding into how I myself can make myself better. And just by you being here and giving us your valuable wisdom and being able to understand how you've built your business is invaluable. Do you have guests?
Both. We do. Yeah, we do some editorials and guests as well. So
when you're talking to your guests, what is it that you pull out of them? What's the information that you're gathering from them?
I want to make them cry. I'm serious.
That's the goal.
Just like that, I don't go with that goal, but I go with just what you just said. I want to know what's making them tick. Mm-hmm. You know, the fact is, entrepreneurship is, forget about cannabis for a sec. Entrepreneurship is probably the sexiest job around. You see it on people's Instagram handles, entrepreneur, and it's a misused word. The question is, are you really an entrepreneur? But really, what is the thing that drives you? And I can't express enough how important that is. So I'll give you a great example. So a few weeks ago, I had a good friend of mine. Her name is Kim B, Kymb. She's an influencer in the cannabis industry. She's very open with her story. From the East Coast. So she's a Jersey, lives in Manhattan now, Jersey girl, Manhattan. Used to grow weed, has a great story about why she started in the industry to help her parents. And as we were talking, I didn't want the usual stuff. I didn't want, how much did it take? What did you do first? Don't give me the blueprint, the steps. I want to know the reason why you decided to dive into it. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't my intent to make people cry, but it just happens because when you really tap that heartstring, when you tap the thing, and I don't mean literally make them like shed tears, but you get into the place where, you ask why 5 times, like Toyota says, ask why 5 times. It literally almost came to that. And I said, well, why, Kim? And she goes, Rick, we recorded this live. So it's on our YouTube show. She said, Rick, you're the only person that's made me cry on live TV. And I said, that's not my intent, Kim. I love you, girl. And she told her story. And I cannot iterate and reiterate enough. That story is what makes you super powerful. That's what makes some of the questions you ask. When we first, in our very first business, MedTrust, which we grew to a very large company, I didn't know shit about growing a business. I'm a nurse. I didn't go to B school. All I knew was I wanted time with my dog, my mountain bike, my girlfriend, my kids. That's all I wanted. And I realized that what we were doing is helping veterans in beds because we became a federal contractor. We were putting doctors and nurses into military hospitals around the country. After 9/11, our company exploded. No pun intended. We grew by leaps and bounds because of the deployment cycles of our troops. And I was an Army nurse at the time, so I knew my number was going to be punched. What we understood was this. We didn't start a staffing company, Abel. No, if you're going in to start a marijuana company, you're wrong. If you're going in to start a staffing company, you're wrong. What we did is we started this to help our veterans, to help a service member laying in a bed. We knew that each and every day, a 12-hour shift, a 24-hour shift in a military base, a cache, a hospital, whatever, we were going to leave a service member's life better as well as their family. That's what made us different. We just happened to do it by staffing. And that's why I say most people get it wrong. And we did have our trials and tribulations. When we first realized we had to make a big payroll and we didn't have the money, I was like, WTF, this is now real business. Mm-hmm. We now went from 1 employee to 10 to 20 to 600, and we had payroll to make. That's when I think I realized the punch in my face. We have a real business. And that's why I'll just share this. Success leaves clues. The things that I could share with you, do not replicate. And some things I'll share with you, absolutely steal and replicate. Don't make the same mistakes. How we overcame those obstacles. I didn't know anything about angel investing back then. I didn't know about equity, private equity. I didn't know about any of that. I knew I had a 401k and that if I was going to survive, I had to cash it in. I do not recommend that.
No.
But I had to cash in all chips on the table, my 401k. That's how we survived. And that was pretty much, I was all in.
So I'm assuming that you got it all back.
We got it all back.
That's good. Let's exit and we're good.
We got it all back.
Oh man, I'm so excited to have you on the show. It's such a pleasure. Just knowing that you have a different perspective and the way that you think and how you formulated your thoughts towards your business is so unique. I mean, I shouldn't say unique because I'm sure there's entrepreneurs out there and that's how they think, but it's not typical. It's atypical the way people think. They want to, and you just like you said, there's a blueprint that we want to know. What'd you start with? How much did you start with? Are there any obstacles that you overcame? What challenges did you face? All the things that you face as an entrepreneur starting a business. Yes, those are the things that we want to know as an entrepreneur. Because if I want to start, if I have a screen printer on the show and I want to know how to build a screen printing business, I want to know what steps he took. Right. I want to know how much he invested, who's he talking to, who's his network. I want to know those things. But to be able to get the perspective, the inner thoughts of how an entrepreneur really thinks like yourself is totally different. Like you can look at something from a different perspective and think, man, I'm looking at this totally introspectively. And then why? And you're looking at that with the 5 whys. And I think that takes your business to another level, because then now you're not just thinking about the money. You're not thinking about, not so much the end result, but the reason why you're doing this. And does it fall into that plan of your life?
Yeah.
And so the 5 whys that you talk about, how do you implement that? Like, what is it that you're asking your friends and family or people that come to you? I want to be an entrepreneur. Why? I want to invest I want to be an angel investor. Why? So just knowing the why, man, that's key. That's just, it's almost a given, because you have to know first who you are, what you want to do, and how you're going to get there. And so understanding how the reasoning behind it is huge. It's huge.
Yeah. Abel, a few things that really glowed for me as you're talking is in what you said, you mentioned the word network, and something that I've learned, and the reason why I've joined several mastermind groups and affinity groups for entrepreneurs, and some big, some small, is because your network is your net worth. Your great example is I was part of a group, a mastermind group for many years. This was long before my cannabis foray, and met some folks, high-level entrepreneurs from all over the world. And one of them, we became friends. Several friends, but one of them friends. But I never really knew what he did until the day I had to know what he did. And turns out he was the founder, president, CEO of one of the largest hemp growing companies in the world. When I met him, I had no desire to learn about hemp until the day that I did. Your network is your net worth. Second thing you mentioned is the 5 whys. And the first thing is it's got to come from a place of authenticity. It's got to come from a place of not a badgering why, because people sense when you're badgering. The third thing, and I'll give you a real story around that, around a literal story that happened at the Pearl sometime last year. I won't use names, but the next thing is I would never hire a 21-year-old as a life coach. And what that means is this: it not only has to come from a place of authenticity and actual caring about a fellow human being, but I kind of want to talk to somebody who's been to the place where I want to be. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It feels different. And so take that for what it means, all the listeners out there. But here's the story. So a couple of friends of mine, a couple of young ladies, they had the same questions. I wanted to learn about cannabis. I want to get in the industry. How do I start? Where do I go? And before I started using the Barnes and Noble line, I would have a lot of coffee. A lot. My brain was so picked, the whole pick your brain. Now, when people say, can I pick your brain? What it really says to me is, let me pick your back pocket. And I say that with love and respect, but it's just people need to educate themselves first. But we had coffee and we met at the Pearl, and they were 2 young ladies about to go into business together. One of them talked a lot. One of them was quiet, and I already knew them. They were both coming from different industries, not cannabis. They wanted to start something in the industry. They were on fire. They had passion. You could sense it. One of them talked a lot. One of them didn't. And so I asked them, and just very casual, I said, so what's the reason? Why do you guys want to do this? And I didn't say why, just like that. I said, what do you guys want to do this? And the one who talks a lot gave me the answer, and he talked a lot. And I said, I get that. I said, much respect. I said, why is that important to you? And the one that talks a lot answered again. And I said, do me a favor. I said, Michelle. I said, can I hear from Rochelle? And I think Michelle was a little taken aback because she's the talker. And I think Rochelle was a little taken aback because she didn't think she was going to have to answer. And I said, why is this important? And she goes, well, it's what Michelle said. We're driven, we're hungry, we're hard chargers. We've had success as salespeople in this other business. I'm like, okay, so why is this important to you though? And she goes, we're ready to leave the 9 to 5. We want to start our own thing. We're ready to take charge of our future, our life, and insert whatever word is relevant. See where I'm going? The answer is getting this little deeper. And I said, but why is that important to you? And I said, Rochelle, because I could see Michelle ready to jump in. And she said, because I've never really done my own thing. And I know that I have something more in me. I know that there's more that I can tap into. And I feel like this is just, even the words were changing. I feel like this is the right time. And I said, I get it. I said, I feel it. I understand that viscerally. I said, but I got to ask you another question. And she says, what? And I said, why is that important to you? And there was this moment, got quiet. And she said, because I owe it to the people around me. And I said, all right. I said, what people? And why is that so important to them? And the silence was a little longer. And even Michelle, the talker, I'm not quite sure, knew what she was going to say. She said, Rick, because I lived in a car. She said, when I was little, my mom was single. My dad had left and we couldn't afford anything. And I lived in the backseat of the car. And I remember my mom trying to make life better. And I remember being in the backseat of a car. And I remembered it being and feeling that this is not the way life should be, but it was something that we had to go through. And I was a kid. She said, I never want to be in that fucking car again. And she was crying. She said, I never want to be in that car again. And I said, I get it. Can I ask you a question? And she said, yes. I said, you have kids? She said, yes. I said, how old's your oldest? She goes, 10. I said, about the age you were? She said, yes. I said, what if you have to look at your son and one day say, son, we're going to have to move into a car? And she said, it ain't happening. I knew and she knew at that moment she could have sold pencils and she was going to be the world's best fucking pencil salesman because
Absolutely.
she knew she was never going to put her son in a car. That is the importance of understanding what drives you, because when you know what drives you and it's anchored in emotion and it's deep, you will not fail. You will drive and drive and drive and pivot and use all the entrepreneurial words you want. Fail and rise and phoenix and pivot and do this until you succeed, because you do not want your 10-year-old in a car. That's what's missing from the true bred entrepreneur. They're doing things because it's sexy, it's cool, and yeah, but the book says fail and you learn. I'm like, fuck that. The person who posts the meme of I never fail, I either win or I learn, they're fucked up.
Yeah. They
weren't in touch, in tune with what's driving them. I get it. Sometimes we lose. That's not meme worthy for me. That's not. I don't want to post a meme about how I lost or I learned. Fuck that.
Yeah.
I don't want my kid in a car. And yes, I may trip and fall, but my brown ass is going to be back up, hustling, grinding the very next day, because I don't want my kid in the car. If you're listening to this, figure out what your kid in the car is. Then figure out the business you want to grind at. Start that way.
That's amazing, man. You know, I think as you're growing up, and then you're put into situations in this life that dictate who we are as people, you know, and then we're put into situations that help us persevere. And those things that created either pain or, you know, brought us into a situation where we overcame those. I mean, there's plenty of times where I've looked at myself in the mirror and asked, can I do this? Can I really do this? You know, I was building a business. I was going to school full time. I had another full-time job, and I was, you know, going through a divorce. I was raising 2 kids at the same time. And I'm asking myself, why am I doing this? You know, can I do this? And I remember looking at myself in the mirror and I said, you have to do this. You have no option. You're in this situation, you're going to make the best of it, and you're going to build this business, and then you're going to be where you want to be. You're going to do this for yourself, for your kids, and you're going to build this business. And it did. And eventually we sold it. But, you know, it was that moment, that breaking point where a lot of people don't get to, where you're working 14, 16, 17, 18 hours a day, and you're just hitting it, man. You're out there and you're working and you're like, why am I doing this? And then it just clicks like a freaking light bulb. All of a sudden, you know what you got to do. What are your plans now? What are your plans for the future with your company?
We're April 1st of 2020 will be 1 year from our first episode launch. So we're coming up to about 10 months in, about 100 episodes. So we're recording a lot of content. We're putting out stuff on our Instagram, YouTube, but that's not what you asked. Where we're going is our next step is monetization. You know, it's my wife will say, Rick, you have an expensive hobby. And there's a lot of truth to that, you know, and there's a lot of truth to that. And being that she's my bellwether, my parole officer, my attorney, my wife, all those rolled into one, she's right. So our next step is I treat it as a business, and our next step is monetization, whether it's through ads or partnerships, because one of the unique things we do bring to the table isn't just the podcast per se. It's the fact that we have a pretty large social following. So we're going to wrap that all in, and our speaking engagements. We're in front of audiences across the country. We bring a very unique package, if you will, and I'm going to sell it. The package is, of course, the podcast, We Know Basis, and my mug, my face. But I learned a long time ago, you know, it's the soapbox. You build it, you stand on it. There's nobody who can stand on your soapbox better than you can. And we've built our soapbox. And April 1st is the launch of season 2. And we're going to be putting out marketing media packages and I want to say baby steps, but that goes back to the mindset of no baby steps. You want to take large leaps. So monetization, I have been paid to speak. And of course, I shared with you, I'm still being a nurse now keeps me in tune to the first company we ever launched. Because one thing I didn't share is that I was working 12-hour night shifts, 4 to 5 days a week, 7 p to 7 a in an emergency room. And from 7:30 a to about 11:30, we were working on our company.
Man.
So
I know what you mean. I mean,
you got to do it.
You know what? I commend you on what you do, because what you do, not a lot of people can do. And a lot of people don't understand that. But what's the deal with men in emergency rooms?
I know, right?
I mean, is it an adrenaline rush or what? Because, oh my gosh. But anyways, that's a side note. I'm just curious but I do. I mean, I understand, and what you do is an amazing thing, and it should be commended for sure. And so you feel like you're going to monetize. I definitely want to make money. And I know that this podcast can, and I know that it has a potential for generating some income. But at this point, I have not introduced any kind of sponsors. Yeah, there's some like affiliate type programs that we have in our show notes and stuff like that. But I have yet to pull the trigger. Because when I'm watching a movie, I don't want to be interrupted by commercials, and I always feel like if you're listening to the podcast and then all of a sudden it's like, well, by the way, we're sponsored by, and then you go into like a 30-second disquisition of why you should use this company, then right. I don't know if that's something I want to do just yet. Of course, if we get enough listeners and it's profitable, definitely. But the company is still growing. And of course, the podcast is just the first phase of this before we start launching the other part of phase 2 of the creative entrepreneur, which would be kind of almost what you're doing, which is the media part of it. And then we'll start talking to other businesses and introducing our photography, videography, and all of the other components that are associated with the creative entrepreneur. And hopefully, it goes somewhere and we can start to help other businesses grow. Right now, there's this huge rage, just like a freaking flood of people building content and generating these masterminds and webinars and all kinds of stuff. So if you type in like media or marketing in your search engine, you're going to be flooded with all kinds of information on how you can build your business and how you can advertise with us and we can build this multi-million-dollar lead generating service for you, and it's so that's the sexy thing right now. You just log on to Facebook and all of a sudden, there's click funnels and lead pages, and all of a sudden you got to get, this new guy, Gene. Have you heard of him?
The marketer, Gene, the marketer.
Yeah, Gene, yeah. So,
yeah.
I mean, he's crazy. Just it's crazy how much, and he does it live too, which is insane. And so there's all these types of businesses that are just popping up everywhere. I love it. That's the part that I love. And so that's the industry that I want to go into, which is the, helping the businesses grow. And so that's what this creative entrepreneur platform is for. And of course we're working on, getting into the minds of other entrepreneurs and of course helping others.
Yeah.
Primarily veterans, minorities, business owners, and people who just want to build their business.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a noble endeavor.
That's
noble endeavor.
There's my why. Cause I started doing this not because of the money. I mean, I honestly, like, the money was insignificant. And when I pitched this to a friend and a couple of people just to bounce the idea off of them. And I remember pitching it to a friend, and I remember telling him, I'm like, look, it's not about money. It's just about helping other people. I just really want to go out there and help other entrepreneurs build their business. And what am I going to do? I got the photography business. I got the videography business. I'm going into the marketing. Why not, provide a platform where they can bounce their ideas and showcase their business and all for free. I don't charge people to come onto the show, and they can just go in and talk about their business and how they built it and, what books they've written and talk about all this other stuff, which is great to me because I get to learn from them, but also the audience gets to learn from them.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that we like to do when we wrap up a show is if you can give us 3 words of wisdom, just rules that you live by real quick.
Love that. So this is the first thing that comes to mind because my wife and I deviated from these rules and we learned a harsh lesson. It's 3 words: laptop, Wi-Fi, sandwich, meaning sandwich. It's a play on the word sandwich. And with those 3 rules, those 3 words symbolize our rules, because after having a company with hundreds of employees, and I know you said real quick, but we wanted to launch the next phase of our life, if you will, whether that's business or because we're empty nesters, and make sure that whatever we did, if it violated one of those 3 words or rules, then we weren't going to do it. So meaning laptop, can we run our business literally as we're recording? My wife is in the other room here in your studio on her laptop, literally right now as we're. Can we do our work from a laptop anywhere remotely? Second thing, Wi-Fi. All we need is Wi-Fi. If we have good Wi-Fi, whether it's a coffee shop, a hotel, whatever it is, we can do work. Sandwich, as long as we have food. Literally laptop Wi-Fi sandwich. In other words,
that's awesome.
That's why brick and mortar was such a no-go for us. It's like, no, it violates that. That's why we outsource things like we outsource the production of our podcast. We don't have an employee. We outsource it. No more employees. If it violates those 3 words / rules, we weren't going to do it. So that's
freaking awesome, man. Yeah. So I love it, dude. Well, there you go, guys. Rick Martinez, an amazing, amazing interview with an amazing person. I'm so glad you came on the show. You're an inspiration to me. You're an inspiration to our listeners. And I'm so glad to have had you on the show. Thanks, Abel. This has been a blast. I really, really appreciate it. You're an awesome person. Thank you. Thanks, homie. All right, guys, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. Check out thecreativeentrepreneur.net and tune into the show notes and check them out. We're going to have all the information for Rick Martinez on there. And until next week, keep on keeping on.
Thank you for listening to The Creative Entrepreneur. Please click the show notes for additional information. Want to know more? Click on the subscribe button and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter by visiting us at tcepodcast.net.